Hey everybody, Speedy here, Bennu Studio Inc. Back to continue the series Tales from the Drafting Table. This is episode number 13, and we're moving along quite well. I did have some technical trouble in it, and I'll get into that in the video. But anyway, let's go ahead and get to this. Well, here we go. You'll notice something in here. I lost some footage in the process of making these videos. I found the limit of my current recording capabilities. I can kind of lose myself when I'm working and drawing, and I failed to notice that I can't really record more than an hour at a time. And as you'll notice by the way I've been doing these, I kind of speed them up afterwards and condense them into the video. I lost a good hour's worth of footage and got a character and everything finished all the way, like color study wise, and got no recording of me doing it. And I highlight that at the end of the video, how much I just in general got done over this particular video, but also from the footage that I lost. I do plan on upgrading my recording methods around August. I mean, I kind of give myself long dates like that. If I can upgrade or change or improve my method of recording before then, I definitely will, but I'm not going to put pressure on myself to do it before it's feasible for me to do it, you know? But in this episode, I'm focusing more on like the color study aspect and a little bit less on the sketching and refinement. There's a method to my madness, if you will, when I'm working through a drafting process. Like, my motivation behind doing a color study is to find out what works, when and where to improve contrast and potential for mixing mediums to give final production like a really close look to what's inside my own head, like my own visual of how it looks as a final. I mean, I see the artwork done already in my head, and doing this color study and refining it and working in this way enables me to see, well, the kind of mistakes I might make doing the final if I'm not aware of them ahead of time. And so this is kind of like pregame, yeah, like a pregame setup, like football players and baseball players, softball players, athletes. We go through a pregame kind of training, prepping for the opponent. That's kind of what I do when I do a draft and a color study, especially the color study part. You know, um, it also helps me really figure out for sure if I'm choosing the right final medium for the subject. And I do this specifically on these things where they're like montages or compilations of many different images where there's a lot of lapping and overlapping going on. Um, so that's also kind of why I'll go back and forth. I'll do a heavy amount of color study, then I'll drift back over to like pencil work. The reason I do that is because since there is like the overlapping and things that fall into the background but start out as prominent and then fall into the background of something else, this gives me the ability to see where there's going to be bottlenecks and problems, but also it allows me to produce the one that's supposed to be the most forward so that the next pieces can be aligned in the right place to fit really well and still get all of the components of the background that I want to have an impact. But also, this comes from an early experience. As I said in the earlier parts of the drafting table series, I got started really young, and I had a couple of mentors before a very important, the most important mentor I end up having, um, was Ken Lawton. I'm calling him out by name, Ken Lawton. Hey, Ken. He taught me like the value of like texture, technique. He taught me, or I should say, he refined my drawing skill and opened the door to the many techniques and approaches you could take, and made me mindful of things like backgrounds and how to manipulate them to make the foreground even stronger and vice versa, and the when and where to apply techniques. And we focused on just pencil work, improving my pencil work, which is something I didn't have training at. I was kind of the watercolor instructor kept me in like sacred geometry, and so a lot of compasses and rulers and very rigid kind of work, and taught me about the canons a little bit. So I could already develop bodies of animals and humans by identifying the shapes, using sacred geometry. So I had a very rigid technical approach to drawing, um, that actually needed to be opened up so I could be better at other mediums later, like oil bars and oil painting and acrylic, watercolor, in a different approach to watercolor. My mentor over in Europe, he um, he was focused on doing a very specific, very soft, almost Asian style approach to watercolor. He was from Hungary. He was heavily Eastern influenced, so I learned that type, but watercolor is as broad as color pencil, and it's as broad as what you can do with acrylic and oil painting. It's got many different like types and approaches to it. And I really did only learn one way and one math and one kind of way to compose or construct. And I didn't learn any of the like little secrets until Ken come along and shared a lot of like really big things with me. For me, I didn't before him spend any time doing pure pencil artwork. It was always do enough to get onto the medium, and I actually made a lot of mistakes because of that approach. But I didn't mind. I didn't mind. I just the act of painting, or you know, mostly painting. I was heavy into watercolor painting. Just doing that like made me happy, and I did get pretty good at it. Even if I'd see the mistakes, nobody else would sometimes. But he comes along and he actually hones in and sharpens my pencil skill. And through sharpening my pencil skill, one, it actually made me more flexible and more able to explore on my own, kind of break out of the rigid boundaries that I'd been trained in, as far as drawing and composition, and how to blend and bring things together. And in that sense, it makes montages super easy for me now. I don't do them very often, but like when I do, I'm definitely drawing on the things that he taught me. Um, and how you could take just a single pencil, same shade, like the same pencil, like it's the same color all the way through, and get so much depth and so much texture where you can visually feel the fur or the feathers or the roughness of mountain ranges, that kind of thing, with purely just pencil, and knowing when to put things in and when not to put things in. You know, when a vacancy is not a vacancy, how to do void space or work with void space too, not just about entirely filling up every piece of the paper with detail, getting away from the over detail oriented at the right time, and then knowing when to hone in and focus on the really tight details. Um, he was invaluable in teaching me that, and ultimately, because of going through that process with him, it made me better at drawing in general. Now, during that time, I was also learning in school, and I had another mentor who was an illustrator, but again, he was very rigid also, and I couldn't see a crossover between your drawing to prep and the medium, and how they were, your final medium, you were going to do something, and I couldn't see the connection of how they were relative to each other until I mentored with Ken. And so I actually have in my portfolio some stuff that I did while he was teaching me. I plan to show that and share that um, here pretty soon. But also, after my time learning that from him, I was able to apply it to every kind of medium. Was kind of suddenly able to look at my inner vision and tell by the way the textures, the colors, the contrast, tell by how everything looked, whether or not I needed to mix mediums, which medium is best to accomplish all of the things visually I'm seeing, knowing and understanding the limitations of each one and being able to just visually see what goes where, how many different components are best in oils, how many different, like doing math in my head about counting up the spaces. Now, typically, if I'm not doing a montage, I work in a kind of a four square type of mentality, um, like the cardinal directions, you could argue, but four squares. So I compose that way and I refine and I work and do my finished work that way. But with doing montages, you have to move around a lot more. You have to kind of drop some of the rigidness. You need anchor points that are rigid, but you also need to be able to like drop that stuff. And it's definitely from my mentorship that Ken taught me as an artist. But he was a lot more than just an art teacher, he was a life teacher. He showed me that it was actually a great path to be a person of depth and focus and to pursue what really like makes me happy. And being a mentalist was already happening to me then, and he made it look cool. He made it look like it's the ultimate path, if you will. And so ultimately, because of that, I ended up going and exploring all kinds of things I never even would have thought to explore. All the different like Eastern religions, all of the Northern Europe religions, all the Southern Europe religions, all the African religions, looking at all the folklore. He sent me down this journey of trying to find answers inside myself and outside of myself. And ultimately, I was already aware of who Toth was. And he didn't introduce me to Toth, but he did introduce me to like an example of being a mentalist and having a strong gift of empathy and a strong ability to read the body language, the social cues, the general behavior, the energy of people around me. Um, One, it was valuable for protecting myself, but two, it was also valuable for improving myself, of being able to pick up quickly on things I knew were not going to be good for me or healthy for me, and learning quick how to gracefully distance myself without becoming a target. Now, that doesn't always work. Oh, believe me, I know what that's like. I'm going through it right now, but I'm all good. I've come to learn that, like, when you're trying to go somewhere big and do big projects and do big things, you are always going to run into people that actually bothers. And it's their own internal thing going on, it's their own hurts and it's their own things going on. People will project that on you, or when they find somebody who's got like optimism and ambition and goals, not everybody likes people like that. um, that's okay with me. It's a lot of that is because of the things I learned from Ken and how it spun me into all these different directions. And because of spending so much time drawing, naturally I came to research the whole field itself, being an artist. Um, Also, he was really big in introducing me to the art world as far as the Renaissance era, the Impressionists, not necessarily like visual or doing um, classes or studies about them, but about the artists' lives themselves, how they lived with and survived all the pitfalls and all the challenges that a creative mind runs into in a normie world. The normie world needs us and we need them, but it's an interesting balance dynamic. Like, that's the best way to put it. He taught me early enough that there's a world that I'm going to be navigating, and that there's these artists who've all navigated it already. These dead artists, your Dead Poet Society. Well, me and Ken have our Dead Artist Society. Dang it! And you know, because of him just introducing me to the names and going and find out what their struggles were, showed me people I have things in common with, people I don't want to have things in common with, and I make sure I don't emulate them. Um, you know, Finding all of the mentors and all of my fellows throughout history. and learning everything I can about overcoming challenges because they technically all overcome some kind of social stigma, social challenge. All of them did. Some of them were the cause of their own stigma and social challenges. You could definitely argue Michelangelo was, and I'm a huge admirer of him. And I mentioned that in one of my saga videos. Be careful who you like, look up to, who you take as such a serious role model. I still love me some Michelangelo because of his. It doesn't matter. I've never done it before. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it good. He had such a beautiful mind and like discipline, a mental discipline about him that was just amazing. But his life, he brought as much problems to himself as he solved for himself. He was one of those always in he was in his head a lot, but he's also always in conflict. He was Mr. There's a right way and there's a wrong way, and damn it, the hell with everybody doing the evil things. I'm not cool with it. And everybody's like, shh, that's the Pope. And he's like, I don't care. I'll take the Pope on. And the thing is, him and the Pope went around and around and around and around, and sometimes they were kosher and sometimes they weren't kosher, but ultimately, they end up being counterweights to each other, almost like soulmates, or like twin flames in a really weird kind of way. He wasn't a very good pope. He did get better from time to time, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Michelangelo was a really good counterweight to him. Because Michelangelo himself also wasn't exactly an angel. Dude got his face busted up starting a fight over some. I don't even remember what it was, but he got pissy about something, got into a fistcuff, got his like nose tweaked a little bit, and he was a kind of a vain dude, so he placed a lot of love into his own image. He loved his own image a lot, and he didn't handle getting his face busted too well. Um, but I learned from guys like him, so I don't emulate him 100%. I mean, I've never been in a fistcuff over like some artistic dispute or anything like that. But I've stood up to leaders and villains before when they're just absolutely wrong and they must be opposed. I've done that before, and yeah, it brings you a lot of chaos and a lot of problems. Somebody has to do it, and there has to be a line somewhere. And Michelangelo definitely was like a big inspiration for me. I mean, he didn't fight every battle, but he meant it when he fought one. And he withstood the Pope. Most people got flayed and burned on a stick for messing with popes. Not this dude. Not this dude. Because they did know him to be honorable. He was well known for being pretty honorable and pretty straight shooting dude and not trying to harm anybody, but literally thinking about what's best for his community that he was a part of. You know, so I kind of talked a little longer about that mentor than the others. And there's people like Vincent van Gogh. His life was so tragic, really was. And I can't say that, like, he's not one that I look at like, oh, I don't want to emulate him. I literally can't. Number one, I don't have epilepsy. Okay. So I don't have that. I don't have a drinking problem, which he probably had because he had epilepsy, strangely enough. They didn't understand those kind of things. And his sweet mate, his on and off artistic partner, because yeah, we like to pair up with other artists and work because we push each other, we motivate each other. Um, well, those dudes, I tell you what, they would fight, get drunk, and just tear their apartment up or their little house up. They were at it all the time. So that's the part of him that I was like, now I don't want to be in one of those kind of artist relationships where one minute we're painting daisies and sunflowers, and the next minute we're trying to noose each other and hang each other by the rafters. I don't want to be in one of those warring kind of artist relationships. And like as I got older, I started realizing, wait a minute, I don't really want to be in those kind at all. So as much as I like Michelangelo's like fierceness and his righteousness and his willingness to stand up to evil and and really negative like approaches and so forth, relationship wise, I wouldn't want to be in that kind of relationship with a pope or with anybody for that matter. I don't enjoy the idea of being in adversarial relationships that are traumatic. It's the best way to put it. I don't mind him being in challenging ones. you know, an artist or a colleague or a soulmate or anything like that that actually challenges me in places that I'm blind to. That's actually really cool because I'm kind of obsessed with self improvement and I'm obsessed with improving artistically too. They kind of go hand in hand. They're both a part of who I am, and all of this is coming out of that mentorship with Kin. He refined my drawing skills. Like I said, I could already draw, but he took me on a journey that taught me so much more beyond just drawing. He took me on a journey to teach about the mind behind the people who were the greatest of all time in history artistically, and their flaws and the traps, and why it's important to do more than just study the work they did. Study who they are. If you study who they are and who they were and how they lived, their artwork will radically immediately look different. You will see different things in the artwork than anybody else who's just looking at it like, oh, that's a pretty picture. You'll see so much more. I think a perfect example of that would be the Impressionists. There's a tragedy going on right there, and people don't realize. What became known as a style was really about, what, eight, nine artists who were practically half blind at that point. They were so old, hadn't stopped, but they were half blind. So they really would only see the colors and the color contrast. They couldn't see details, line, form. They really couldn't see that anymore. Everything was kind of a blur, like there was a constant water in their eyes. And so Impressionist paintings are literally that. And they're actually tragic. I mean, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. Nature unlocked a painting style that wouldn't have happened had the people involved in that movement already on some level were declining in their visual facilities. Um, so a nature about it. There's a beautiful but tragic nature about it. And all of this because of Ken. Unlike all my mentors during, before, and after, he had a very holistic teaching. It wasn't about line, form, and texture only. It wasn't about contrast. It wasn't about near and far only. It wasn't only about composition. It was about the part of you as the creator that you put in the work. It's about knowing your subject well enough that you put an equal part of you and an equal part of it in there. It's obviously going to be filtered through you, but he taught me to actually connect to my art by connecting to artists and studying them all the way back in time. And one of my earliest things, as I mentioned, that I repeatedly drew were my bodybuilding bird-headed men in togas. That's the earliest thing I drew, and it's something I always ended up coming back to until I got to where I understood who Toth was. Now, I'm not saying I got some kind of downloads where I knew who he was when I was younger. No, I was actually in a place where my uncles and my grandpa were always bodybuilding, and there were a lot of turkeys and herons and birds around. So you draw what you see, you draw what's in your environment, and my young little brain naturally combined the two most prominent things together. That, and I probably couldn't see their faces very good at that point. I could do big things. And the birds were down at my level. I could see their faces really good. So they ended up with bird heads. It's something really simple like that. But my first artistic mentor, he recognized it as Toth. It spooked him. I just let it. I'm not about that woo woo stuff. But like, the importance of Toth, though, was it made me go back and look into what the world was like for artists back in that era. There were armies of artists. It was huge industry. It was a huge industry, and a good quarter of the population in some way were involved in the arts. But the most important were the scribes. And so kind of also unlocked my brain about, like I said earlier in this, about learning about folklore, learning about history, learning about everywhere the artists have been, finding the paintings at the caves of Larnax, finding the petroglyphs all over rocks all over the world, realizing, whoa, those are my brothers and sisters. That's the work of my brothers and sisters from a time so unfathomably long ago. I'm in a profession that's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, truly human things. Animals don't actually make artwork, they do make tools. So it's not tools that make us special. There are animals that make tools. It's not tools. It's the ability to create abstract representations of really major, large, complex human experiences and events. To be able to codify, think about the alphabet itself. The alphabet itself rises up out of a pictorial language until it gets refined down to such perfect symbols to go with phonics. You know, and I really think that the written language is because, and the phonic connection, the refinement of the pictographic into symbols that have a phonic sound. I really believe that's because of music, us harnessing music. We were harnessing music at the time when we were so closely refining our visual communication that the two collided and created this child called the written language that is phonic based. That's literally really how I see it. All my research points in that direction. And I love every single human along that journey that had a hand in it. The ones that painted bisons and deer, and the ones that carved in rocks, the hunters with their spears chasing mammoths, and the ones that carved sacred symbols into stones to set upon altars, or to use in special brews. So, what people don't know is like old alchemy, they would take a stone and they would heat it up, and they would take that heated up stone and they would drop it into a vase of water to boil the water and whatever herbs and whatever they were trying to, you know, blend. So, I mean, there's so many things that artists do and things that artists over that are get overlooked for all the time. Your cell phones, everything you have, vehicles, buildings. There's an artist behind all of that. So we're actually still a big profession. We've just got bunches of little specializations. Um, I'm like I said, a super multimedia artist, so I will use whatever fits my inner vision, whatever is on my inner screen, if you will. I'm a very visual person, obviously, it's why I'm an artist, but I'm also an auditory person, so I'm very connected to music. They're all frequencies. They're all frequencies. That's beautiful, though. The whole of existence is beautiful because we're able to replicate it through symbols, through color, through art, through sound. Animals can't do that. We can do that. That's what makes us special. That's what makes us awesome. And that's what keeps driving me too, though, is that I know, at least for 100,000 years, there's been somebody like me doing this job, doing what I do now. This is something that's so hardwired into the species. No matter how much AI improves and no matter how many non artists are able to suddenly produce quote unquote masterpieces, they're not if it took you a few minutes. A masterpiece has a lot of mentalism in it, and without it, it don't exist. Mona Lisa's a masterpiece because, dun, da, 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 I'll tell y'all a little secret. That's his sacred feminine portrait. So that's a self portrait of Leonardo da Vinci in his feminine aspect. Now, before everybody goes, oh, he was transgender. No, don't get into all of that. They had a way more sophisticated way of understanding gender than we do. And unfortunately, the people who turn to Hermeticism and turn to sort of like the New Age stuff completely do not understand what it means for gender to be transmutable. That's internal chemistry. It has nothing to do with your sexuality. There's a masculine and a feminine energy inside of every human because we are the type of species that has both masculine and feminine. We're not asexual fungus that reproduces by spores, although some in our community literally function that way. Um, you know, those dudes with 1,000,001 babies mamas. Well, some people think they're spores and not people and aren't very good at managing themselves. So I can't say that we're not all like some kind of fungus, but we're not really designed to be. We're designed to be two primary genders, two energy sources. There's two ends to each battery. There's you see what I'm saying? It's polarization. It's misunderstood. But you know, this color study, this is just helps me get into my mentors. All right there. Well, this wraps up episode 13 of Tales from the Drafting Table. Made a lot of progress. Also lost some footage. Um, it happens. I'm getting better. When I can improve my tech, I will. I kind of discussed it a little bit while I was working on the color study. Made a lot of progress, though. Looks really good. Um, well, anyway, we'll see you in episode 14 where we get a little bit more into the refinement again. Um, anyway, I appreciate everybody that takes the time to check it out and support it. You know, like, subscribe, you know, follow along, share it. Things like that will help us bump the algorithm, but really just likes and thumbs ups. Thumbs up would help a lot. Um, anyway, have a wonderful evening wherever you are, a wonderful day wherever you are, and a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening. I hope you manifest all the good things that you dream about. Okay, peace out of here. Speedy. Bye.